When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we have one of my favorite, a community birth story. But I feel like it's more than a birth story. It is also a fertility story. My guest today, Elizabeth Sullivan, has been on quite a journey. I'm not going to give anything away, but quite a fertility journey, which she shares about. And then she also shares about her birth story. But one of the real takeaways from me with this story is learning to trust your gut, learning to speak up for yourself, finding the team that supports you, and trusting the process. And Elizabeth shares so much about quite the journey. Let me also tell you a little bit about Elizabeth. So Elizabeth Sullivan is a wealth manager advisor and partner in the Mann Sullivan Group at Merrill Lynch. She particularly focuses on working with women in transitions, whether it's due to divorce, the illness or death of a spouse, and other major life events such as retirement or inheritance. Originally from Long Island, Elizabeth lives on the Upper West Side of Manhattan for the last 20 years, and she's involved in several wine organizations, a woman after my own heart, through the tri-state area, and holds the, let's see if I can pronounce this right, the WSET, the WSET Level 3 Award in Wine and Spirits. Elizabeth really takes us on her whole journey from getting pregnant through her labor, through the birth of her miracle child. And I'm really excited for you to hear this and be inspired by this. Now, before we get to Elizabeth's story, I always love to give updates about what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. Really, the best way to be in touch with our schedule for in-studio and online classes and on-demand classes and our myriad of workshops is to check everything out on our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. You will find years of blogs, over 400 podcast episodes, and information about our teacher training. So there's so much going on there. And we do weekly newsletters, and they're not just about our workshops. I like to give supportive, practical tips about pregnancy and postpartum and parenting and breastfeeding. So if you want just a little something in your inbox each week, just a little tidbit of information that can feel funny or supportive, go ahead and sign up for that. It's on our website. And then the last two things I just want to mention is a big thank you for those that have left a rating and review. It's helped people find the podcast. And we talk so much about community at PYC in our classes online, and it does help build that sense of community. So if you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. And one more big thank you to everyone that listens. And then if you have a story to tell, I've had so many people write in wanting to share their story, or we've also had a lot of professionals listen and think they'd be great for the podcast. So it's been an honor to have you as part of our community and have that desire to be on the podcast. So a big thank you all around. Okay, we're going to take a super quick break, and when we come back, please enjoy Elizabeth's birth story. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you today, Deb.
I'm really excited. I remember when I got your email after your birth and I'm like, we need to talk. So I'm really excited to hear your journey because as we talked about before I press record, it is quite a journey. So before we dive into all that, I would love for you just to share a little bit about yourself and then whatever you'd like to share about your pregnancy journey.
Great. So I've known that I wanted to have children always. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day in preparation for talking with you. And I remember as like a 12-year-old going to this little Irish gift shop that my mom would bring us to when we were little. And I literally at the age of 12 bought a onesie there for my future child, which is insane.
It's
I was
really
12.
cute.
Yeah, but I just knew I wanted to be a mom. And, so professionally what I do, I'm a wealth counselor and specifically I do financial planning. So I'm a planner by nature, right? So I had, a checklist of all the things I wanted to have, in line before I had kids. And the years click away and I thought I was doing all the right stuff and froze my eggs, did 2 rounds of egg freezing when I was 34. So I'm like, I have my insurance policy. Everything is going to go according to my plan until it didn't. So I think, as we had been talking about, it's hard for me to talk about my pregnancy journey without talking about the fertility journey, because I feel like it was really, a multi-year journey to get where I ended up when I met you.
Well, let's go into that. Whatever you want to share.
Yeah. So as I said, I had frozen my eggs when I was 34, and I figured that was a great insurance policy. And when my partner and I decided we were ready to start trying, at that point, I was in my late 30s, and he's much older than me. So we had decided, we tried a little bit naturally. And then we said, well, why don't we do a round of IVF? Because that way we can do PGT, pre-implantation genetic testing, to make sure, given his age, that there wasn't any issue. We're implanting a healthy embryo. So our thought in, I guess this was 2021 when we started, was we'll do 1 round of IVF, hopefully get enough embryos for siblings and be done. And we went to a clinic on the east side, kind of a smaller clinic, but had a really good reputation, and did 1 round and were really surprised at the end of that round when we ended up with what they call indeterminate embryos. So they tested them and they said, we really can't tell if these are good or not. The recommendation was, let's do another round. So right away, we did another round of IVF with that clinic. And midway through the cycle, there was some issues with that clinic, and they ended up getting shut down in the middle of my cycle. So I had eggs that I now needed to move to somewhere else. So I ended up back at the large hospital that I had done my egg freezing at. And they suggested, rather than using what we had, let's do another round of IVF, right? So all of these doctors, their approach, even though they were different doctors, was very similar. It was like, we just want to get as many eggs as possible because of your age. So we know we have things in the bank, but let's just do another round of IVF. That's a fresh cycle. That cycle produced only abnormal embryos. So at that point, the doctor said, let's use those 34-year-old eggs that you have stored, and at least we'll know where we are. Remarkably, I think I had 21, 22 eggs. We lost a bunch.
That sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
Is that
right?
Okay? So I guess because I don't really, I've done a few podcasts on IVF. That does sound like a lot, or is that within the norm? Like, what do most people harvest?
I was told,
is that the right word?
Yep. So when I did the first round of egg freezing, I got 9 eggs, and the doctor said, listen, if you really want siblings, to have 1 pregnancy, we recommend having 10 eggs stored. So you really want to probably do another cycle. That's why I did a second cycle back when I was 34. So with 22 eggs, they were like, oh, we doubt that there's going to be a problem. That's a really nice number of eggs, and at a relatively young age. So we were blown away when we lost, I think, like 5 in the thaw, which was really unusual. And then of the ones that we had left, a lot of them didn't fertilize. Even more didn't make it to blastocyst. So by the time I think we got to the end of that cycle, there was only maybe 5 embryos to test, and every single one of them was abnormal. So at that point, I was devastated because I said, well, that was my insurance policy. I'm only older now, and the subsequent cycles haven't really worked out. So, I with frustration and through a lot of tears, I said to that doctor, well, what is our next step? And I was incredibly frustrated because the next step seemed to be to do the same thing again. And, the recommendation was, it's just a numbers game at your age. So, he kind of, I thought, callously said to me, I'm sure you're going to be able to get pregnant. It's just, we might have to do 5, 6, 7 of these cycles. And I just said to my partner, I was like, this is bananas. I mean, they're not even really tweaking anything. We're just going to hit the same nail with the same hammer over and over again. So I left, went to another clinic, and kind of concurrent with that, I kind of took a step back and said, I think that we're approaching this just as treating this very narrow issue, which nobody really seems to know even what the issue is. And I said, let's take a step back and think about what my overall holistic health is. And so I started to explore more on the Eastern side, not in place of Western medicine, but as a complement to. So I started doing acupuncture once a week, started doing some, Eastern medicine, what do they call it? Functional medicine, Chinese herbs, things like that. And it was just the nature of the questions that I was being asked on that side were very different, right? When you think about, they always ask about
They take
diet.
your stress level. They take the whole body, like the whole person experience, mental, physical, emotional, as opposed to just the physical.
Exactly. And just even the way they asked about some physical things, right? In the Western side of things, they would ask about my diet, right? And I'm like, my diet's great, no processed food, eat pretty much all organic, terrific. And that's where the conversation ended. When I said that to my functional medicine practitioner, she said, well, that's wonderful. Now walk me through 24 hours of what eating looks like for you. And so I said, I get up in the morning, I have coffee, but then I'm not really hungry until, 1 or 2 o'clock is usually when I have my first meal. And she said, your cortisol levels are through the roof by the time you get to that first meal. Your hormones are all out of whack, and you have no possibility of getting them back well in hand. So that had never been brought up before. And so through working with her, my whole body just got into a better balance. And I feel like I was better prepared for the next round that I did, which was now at a different clinic. They tweaked the cycle quite a bit, but it was still the same approach of it's a numbers game, right? We just want to get as many eggs as possible because statistically, 1 or 2 of them should be good. Had another failed cycle. So at this point, I think we were 6 stims into this process. So it was...
How many years is that? Is it like 2 months apart, 3 months apart?
So we started in 2021. And I got pregnant in December of 23. No, December of 24. So, I mean, it had been a good close to 4 years from the time that we started. So it was a really long journey, wasn't getting anywhere. And then we actually last fall bought donor eggs because, and at this point, Deb, I had been to a rheumatologist. I'd been to an endometriosis specialist because the frustrating thing, which I'm sure anybody listening to this who's struggled with infertility, sometimes there's an actual diagnosis, right? You have PCOS, there's endometriosis, there's something you could point to. For me, there was nothing, which... On the one hand,
that must have been so frustrating because then you can't do anything.
Exactly. That was it. Right. So it's like, at least if I had a diagnosis, I'm like, all right, I can tackle this. And again, given what I do professionally, I'm all about, let's have a plan. Let's have, a way we're going to attack this problem. And I was being told there's nothing. I know I saw that you had Dr. Amy on your podcast a couple of weeks ago. And, I did a consultation with her because we were thinking about going out to LA. We were thinking about going to Israel. We were just desperate to try something that was different and it was outside the box that I felt like we kept getting put into. And so we ended up buying donor eggs. And I moved to yet another clinic. It was the first time I was working with a woman, which I thought was a big game changer for me. And I just really connected with her. I felt like she really listened to me. And I said in passing, as we were talking to her about using the donor eggs, I said, is there really no chance that I can use my own eggs at this point? Do you think that's just, a fool's errand? And she said, listen, Elizabeth, there's nothing wrong with you. We don't know what the problem is, so it might work. But she said, it's not been working. So if you're willing to accept the statistical risk, I'll give it another shot. And I said, that's great. The caveat being, I don't want to do another full heavy-duty round of IVF with all the drugs, because every time I had done this, including the egg freezing, I lost a bunch of weight. I got really sick. I felt horrendous. And I said, just logically, that can't be good for my body while I'm trying to produce life, right? So I said, I wanted to do a mini stim, which, not to get too technical about it, but it's still, an egg stimulation, but with much lower dosage, very little injectables, much easier on your body. And I'd always been advised against it. I'd raised it with all the other doctors, and they said, well, given your age, it's all just about getting the number of eggs. And I said to her, I really think that it's about getting a good egg. So I'd rather have fewer that are better than a whole bunch of them that don't produce anything. So she said, I don't think that's the best move, but you're really well-researched. You know your body. Let's do it as long as you're willing to accept that it's unlikely to work. I said, fine. So we did the mini. We got 4 eggs. 2 made it to blast. She said, I strongly advise testing them genetically, given what your trajectory has been in the past. And I said, I just want to do a fresh transfer. I just feel like the less intervention for my body, the better. And we did that. And she said, I think it's going to be like a 5% chance that this is going to work. And I was willing to accept that risk. And my son is that 5% baby.
Oh my gosh, I did not know of this.
Yeah. So a very,
gosh.
very long, very difficult journey for sure.
I feel like he's a good luck charm. Like he's going to have all the odds. Like he's got to play the lottery when he's older. Like he's got.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was wild.
So that is crazy. Wow. I knew you told me it was a long journey. I did not know the details of that, which it helps me understand when we had talked about you taking yoga and starting so early. You'd mentioned feel like breaking things in your practice. Can you talk a little bit about how you needed to change your yoga practice and I guess care for your body and shift out of fear? Because I can imagine if you're like, wow, 5%, we got there. And so now you have a viable pregnancy, but I could imagine the nervousness around that.
Oh, it was wild just because I felt that I had such, I'm Irish, so very superstitious. And I felt that I had this bad luck being dragged around through all these cycles. Cause I'm like, everybody I talked to who had done IVF, everybody has a horror story, but then they'd hear my story and they're like, oh no, you win. You have the biggest horror story. So as you said, when I finally got the call that I was pregnant, now I was shifting from, okay, now I've gotten to this point. Oh my God, I really better not screw this up. Right? Because it was so hard won. And so I'd been doing yoga since I was 17. I'm now 42. So had a really established yoga practice. But the moment I got pregnant, I said, well, now I'm going to shift to prenatal yoga because I just don't want to go to a class and have somebody, have me do a twist that I'm not supposed to do. I just had this image of like shaking loose the baby doing yoga. So I remember very vividly that first class that I went to of yours. And I'm looking at all, we're doing the circle time and all the other women are very visibly pregnant. And I walk in there 10 weeks pregnant. You can't tell. And when it came time to talk to me, I remember exactly, as you just said, I said, I'm here because I don't want to break anything. And I really had to shift that mentality because I would say up until the amniocentesis, I spent the first part of the pregnancy not really believing that I was pregnant, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew it was, but every test, even before I moved to an OB and I was still with the fertility specialist, every time I went in and they were checking, the HCG levels, and then they eventually were doing ultrasounds, every appointment, I was assuming that this was the one they were going to tell me that it had failed. Because remember, it was the first time I had not done a genetic test on an embryo. So I was expecting to miscarry. It was a miracle to me that it had taken. And that continued on once I had transferred to an OB. They kept doing screening tests and I was doing great. And then when we got to the amnio, they said, you don't really need this. And I said, well, I want this because I'm just still waiting for that other shoe to drop. So it really took many, many months, until I felt comfortable. And we didn't tell people for the longest time for the same reason, but the yoga had been something that since I was 17 had centered me. And I really was wanting to have that practice in my life now that I was pregnant, because again, having gone through the second half of the fertility journey, a big part of what I think had saved me was thinking about my holistic health, and yoga was a huge part of that. So it was, it was really wonderful to find you guys in your studio, and it just made me feel like I could engage in this practice that had been meaningful to me in a way that I knew was safe.
Did it help you to be around other pregnant folks, or did it cause more anxiety, or did it feel like you could connect with the people there? Be like, oh, I'm with my people now. We're a big pregnant troop.
It was
Or maybe not.
that, I think it just felt one, because again, since it had been such a long journey for me, a lot of my friends are way past this point, right? They have like 12. So I didn't have a community of other young mothers or new mothers. So it was wonderful to be in that space where it just felt, it was okay to just talk about your pregnancy and okay to just be in this community of other women who were super excited about their babies coming. And that was huge for me. So I'd say part of it was the yoga, but a huge part of it was the community.
Oh, I'm actually really glad to hear that. Community is so important. Because I remember I won't go on a tangent, but I know when I started PYC, I wanted it to be so much more than just classes. I really wanted that community to speak volumes. I'm so glad it did for you.
I looked forward to every time I was able to, work was crazy, but every time I was able to actually get into the studio, I was doing tons of yoga, but a lot of it was recorded because of schedule. But whenever I could actually go to the studio, it was delightful. I mean, I would come home and my fiance was like, you seem like a different person when you come back from it, because it just, as you said, it was being with your people, right? And getting to really get excited about being pregnant, which, is not always something you're doing on the outside in the same way as when you're, nesting with a bunch of other women.
Oh, I love that. I want to talk a little bit about assembling your team. So once you trusted, and I think trust is going to be something we come back to a lot, because I think it takes a lot of trust and perseverance to go through that many years, and then trust in the pregnancy. So once you did trust that things were moving, how did you assemble your team, your support team, everybody in the team?
Yeah. And it really was a team. And I think that was something that had I not gone through the fertility debacle, I don't think it would have occurred to me that I needed a team. But, towards the end of the infertility stuff, I had built a team around me of, as I said, acupuncturists, my doctor, a functional medicine person, a bunch of people who were really supporting me. There was a woman on the West Coast who's a fertility coach. She's the one who connected me with Dr. Amy. So I really got this loud and clear that I can't do it on my own, which I'm a very independent person. Typically, I do things on my own. So then when I got to the pregnancy, I said, well, I want to take the same approach and surround myself with people who are going to kind of be the scaffolding around me to help support me, and not necessarily tell me what to do, but people that I could trust to help me advocate for myself. So it was really important to, I think I hired my birthing doula. I was due at the end of August. I hired her in January because I was just so clear on the fact that I wanted somebody who was going to be attending my birth, helping me advocate for myself at a point in time where I perhaps would not be able to, just really help me get into that space that was less clinical, more focused on a holistic, birth plan, working with the doctors. And then I also wanted to have a postpartum doula to help me. I knew that I didn't want a night nurse. I think they can be fabulous, but I know myself really well. And I was like, I want somebody who's going to help me be a new mom, not somebody who's going to take the baby off my hands. So I just felt like I went into this in thinking about building a team, knowing the type of people that I wanted around me, and not just in the roles, but personality wise, right? My mom wasn't really super involved during my pregnancy. So I felt this need to find that maternal kind of force. So a lot of the women that I worked with, both postpartum doula and birthing doula, they were women who I felt that kind of vibe with. They kind of stepped into my mom's role, which was huge for me. And then on the more clinical side, I worked with a pelvic floor PT person because I started to pretty early in the pregnancy have some tailbone issues. And I said, rather than wait until I get to the end of the pregnancy to address this, let's kind of nip this in the bud sooner, because I really, again, just wanted to create this environment around me where I just felt supported. Right. And I think the same thing, a lot of the people I found was actually through your studio, and just really trusting myself in terms of if somebody wasn't a good fit right away, I moved on, because I remember from the fertility journey not feeling comfortable at points, but then feeling like I'm already down this road, so I should just stick with it. And that didn't serve me well. And it was a game changer for me to work with that last doctor who I felt a connection with. So I said during the pregnancy, I wanted the same kind of thing. I wanted to make sure that I was working with people who I felt a connection with.
Oh, I love that story. And I'm so glad we were able to support you with the resources. Okay. I want to hear a birth story, but we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, just share whatever you'd like. And I'm really excited. All right. We'll be right back. Okay. So we're back. I'm just going to sit back and listen. I might have a question here and there, but I'm just going to sit back and listen. So please share your story.
So again, being a planner, I had a birth plan. Although, to be fair, my doula was very clear. You can't call it a birth plan. It's birth preferences because plans go awry. And I heard that intellectually, but I'm like, no. I'm going to have a plan and it's going to go the way I want it to go. And of course, it almost immediately didn't. So I was due on August 25th, and there's this place on the Upper West Side that is famous for, they have, I think it's like an eggplant parm that like induces labor in women. And so kind of as a joke, my fiance and I went the night before I was due, and I went into labor like 6 hours later. So apparently that is it's an accurate assessment of that restaurant. So went into labor early in the morning, like maybe around 4. And I was my plan had been, once I go into labor in my apartment, I wanted to labor there as long as possible. And I texted my doula. She was supposed to come to the apartment, and I said, I feel great. They're like really spaced apart. I think at that point there were like 12 minutes. I just wanted to give her a heads up that today was the day. And then they started getting closer. And then I said to her, I'm bleeding. Is that normal? And of course, she had me send pictures, and she's like, yeah, I don't think this looks good. I think we should go to the hospital. I said, no, you don't understand. We're going to labor at home for a bunch because I'm going to have a really nice meal and, make sure that I can nap and be relaxed. And she goes, no, I think you need to go. So I texted my midwives, and they said the same thing. They're like, I know you wanted to labor at home, but, they were concerned, especially at 42, that there was perhaps an issue with my placenta. So they said, better safe than sorry. So we got to the hospital, went to triage, and it turned out that everything was fine. But I went from contractions every 12 minutes to 7 minutes to by the time I got to the hospital, which was very quick. I lived 5 blocks from where I delivered. My contractions were like every 2 minutes apart. So it moved very quickly in the beginning. And then once I was there, I actually felt, and this was actually part of the reason why I wanted to do the podcast, because you hear so many births, everyone wants to share their birth story, but oftentimes it sort of felt to me when I was pregnant that people wanted to share their birth stories that were like the type of nightmarish, scary stories you'd want to tell around a campfire. Like, let me tell you about my horrible birth. And it's, especially as a first-time mother, you're like, Jesus, this does not sound good. Like it was a menagerie of things that could go wrong. And my birth, even though there were things that didn't go according to plan, was great. And I really wanted to share that with people because it can be this really empowering and wonderful thing. And I think a lot of it is your mindset going in, right? I think it's important to have a plan of the way you would like to see things go, but have flexibility around that. And going back to the team piece, really making sure that you have people around you that you trust so that when things do go not according to plan and somebody is giving you advice, you're going to take that person's advice because you trust where it's coming from. I mean, one of the other things that I hadn't mentioned yet, but when I got pregnant, I had immediately found an OB who was a high-risk specialist because of my age and because it was IVF. My thinking was, if something goes wrong, I want to be embedded already in a practice that deals with high-risk people. And from the very beginning, I mean, my 10-week appointment, they didn't even look up from the chart. They're like, we're probably going to induce you at 38 weeks. And I said, well, why? And why are we talking about this at 10 weeks? And they said, well, statistically, based on your age, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, don't put me in a box. If there's a need to do that, great. But if the baby is not in distress and I'm fine, I'd like to go to term. I'd like to have this be as natural as possible with as, limited interventions. And so, I started to figure out as the months went on that if I was in a position with them during delivery where they told me to do something, I didn't feel comfortable with them. I didn't really trust their judgment because there had been several points during the pregnancy where they told me to do something or suggested that I did something, and I'd go home and research it and decide if I was going to do it because I just didn't have that relationship with them. So midway through my pregnancy, I moved to midwives who were phenomenal and really supported me. So I felt that, going into delivery, if they had told me at some point we need to do a C-section, I wouldn't have liked that feedback, but I would have trusted them and gone with it. So similarly with the labor, I just felt going into it, I trust the people that are around me, my doula, the midwives. I felt really empowered. And I had a very clear sense of being in control of my body. And I think a lot of that was actually from the work we had done in the studio, because there were a couple things that just really stuck with me throughout the months I was working with you in the prenatal classes. Some of it was position stuff, right? I always joked around whenever you did, what's your favorite position? It was always mid pelvis openers for me. I'm like, I love that asymmetry. It just, the visualization of thinking about the baby moving through my pelvis in various stages and what I would need to do to move my body around to accommodate that really was something that was powerful for me. And it was amazing. I don't think we've talked about this in class since I've come back in. Your body does know how to do that intuitively, right? My body during various stages of labor wanted to, rotate my hips outward, inward, but if I hadn't been to the classes and didn't have the tools to know what positions I should go into, right? It's kind of like muscle memory. I don't think it would have been as productive. So that really helped with the labor a ton. And then also you had done a bunch of stuff in class about the, you can do anything for 90 seconds, which honestly, Deb, was my mantra through all of the contractions, through transition. Some of those contractions got really intense, but never did they get so intense that I felt I couldn't handle it. Because I'm like, you just have to handle this like small bite-sized bit of pain. And yes, it's going to come again, but you're going to get a break. And that was gigantic for me.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that this helped you in those really tough moments. Thank you so much for letting me know.
Yeah. And, I think because I felt really in command of my body, that, one of my birth preferences, I said, I wanted to have an unmedicated birth. And I said, not only do I want it to be unmedicated, but don't offer me an epidural. And I think this was actually, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this had been your recommendation, because if somebody offers you,
oh yeah, I talk it like chocolate. If you're on a diet and someone offers you chocolate, you're like, hell yeah. But if they don't offer, you're going to be okay.
I said to my doula and my midwives before I went in, I said, offer me any kind of pain relief. I know it exists. So if I need it, I will ask for it. But if in the middle of a contraction, you offer me an epidural, I'm like, you could offer me any drug under the sun. And I'm going to be like, yes, let's do a lot of it. So don't offer it. And so I ended up having ultimately a 14-hour labor, completely unmedicated, didn't even take any pain relief afterwards. And I think because my body had been so prepared between what I'd been doing in yoga with you guys and what I'd been doing with my PT person, didn't tear, nothing. I mean, I had a phenomenal experience. Pushing wasn't my favorite thing in the world. That was a lot. But, I got through it. I think the only hiccup there was because my son's hand was on his face. He had this hand up.
Ooh, compound. Yeah, that makes it a little harder.
Which, I could have expected because I do not have a good ultrasound picture for the entire pregnancy, because every time they got to his face, his hand was on it. Still the same problem I have when I'm nursing him now. So, it just, he likes what he likes. And that presented a problem with the pushing, but none of it was insurmountable. And I really felt like that experience was a function of, I don't think I would have had that experience had I not had the long fertility years of difficulty, because I really learned how to advocate for myself, how to be comfortable in my own body. And something that you said a lot in class resonated with me, where you're like, trust your body, trust your baby. And I remember at one point when I was pushing, and it was just really frustrating because he was coming down and then coming back up. And it was just, very frustrating. And I remember talking to him, and I was like, this is a partnership. I'm doing this, but you're doing this with me. And I trust you. And I know we both want to be on the other side of this quickly. And that, I think that really helped me in that moment where you kind of get right up to that line where you feel like you can't do any more, and then you do a little bit more.
So that, first of all, that is amazing. And I love all the tools and I love the idea of the partnership. We talk about that a lot in class about you and your baby working together. Was there any moment during all this, because you went through all the fertility and then even up to 20 weeks with the amnio being like, okay, am I really pregnant? And then finally being there, was there any moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really doing this? Like I'm really in it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely after the amnio, because that was, as I said, everything up until that point felt really theoretical. I mean, we didn't get excited about the baby. We didn't talk about names. We didn't do anything. We were just like, let's not pretend this is real. So I think it was after that point was when I realized that the pregnancy was really happening. And then I think during the delivery, there were a couple points, and my doula actually talked about this afterwards when she did her, postpartum debrief. She's like, you were so self-sufficient in delivery, which I didn't even realize I was being, but I think that it was kind of like a learned experience. So even though I had this team around me, there was one point where I was very keen on using the shower during delivery because water therapy it's just really comforting for me. And after the fact, my doula was like, yeah, you just wanted to go in there by yourself. And I said, it didn't even occur to me to ask somebody else to come in to kind of, use the handheld so that I didn't have to. It was like, nope, I'm doing this on my own. And I just felt real ownership over my labor and delivery, which was really nice for me. That I think because of all the years of feeling like I had things done to me as opposed to being in control. And not in control in, this crazy type A sort of way, but just in control in terms of feeling like you have agency in what's going on. And I think so often it just seems culturally now we approach fertility and pregnancy like an illness, as opposed to certainly once the pregnancy happened, it felt really natural and I felt really in my body and that my body just sort of knew what it was supposed to do. And I really wanted to be able to let that process happen, right? Being able to move the way I wanted to move at the points I wanted to move. Using the birthing ball was huge for me in delivery. Some of the stuff that we had talked about in class in terms of, when you're in a uncomfortable position, right? I remember doing the toe thing, which,
screaming
toe.
toe.
Oh my God. And you said during the class, you're like, some people like that. I'm like, who are these people? Because I have to meet them.
Not I.
No, it was torture. But I remember when we were doing that, you're like, what are the things that you do when you're in these uncomfortable, mildly painful positions to help alleviate that and take you out of that moment? And so I would look around the class, and for some people it was being really quiet. And for some people it was, being really still or moving a bunch. And for me, I realized that there was, like those more guttural noises were really helpful. And that was such a valuable tool to have learned in a yoga setting so that I didn't have to learn it during labor and delivery. But my doula was like, you were making noise the entire time. And it just felt like everything I was doing was very primal. And I felt very free to do that because I had the agency during my delivery.
Oh, I love that. So after all this time of the fertility, learning to trust your body, getting through all this, what was it like when your baby was born? And I'm assuming put on your chest. I don't really know what I'm assuming, but
so that was,
what was that?
So that was
like?
the other part. So I said, at the very beginning of labor, it had not gone according to plan. I mean, so much so that I had only had 4 hours of sleep at that point, hadn't eaten anything. So I got to triage and I was starving and exhausted. So not the way I wanted to start my labor. Then the 14 hours was more or less fine. Then when he was born, because there had been this, stress from the hand being up on his face, they were concerned. So they said, my birth preference had been immediately, skin to skin, delayed cord clamping, don't wipe off the vernix, the whole 9 yards. And that couldn't happen, and again, this goes to the point of had my OB, my old, MFM practice, had they said to me, we need to take the baby right away, I would have not really felt comfortable with that. My midwife saying it's the best thing for the baby to be taken and evaluated. I trusted her. I didn't like it, but I trusted her. So they had to clip the cord right away, and they took him probably for about 15, 20 minutes. His initial APGAR wasn't great. And then the second one they did, he was fine, but they wanted to just check and make sure everything was okay. So during that, immediate moment, my fiance was with him. I was waiting eagerly. And of course, all you want to do is hold your baby. So after that 15, 20 minutes, when they finally brought him to me, it was just the most incredible feeling in the world. This thing that, depending on which time frame you look at, you could say, well, I've been waiting for this for, 9 months, or I've been waiting for this for 4 years or 20 years because I've known I wanted a baby forever. So just holding him was unbelievable. And we ended up doing skin to skin for like 2.5 hours because uninterrupted because they couldn't find a room for me yet. And they kept apologizing. I'm like, no, it's great. Leave me here as long as you can. He, latched within 2 minutes of being on me, and it's just been a love affair ever since. And I think because of that long, long journey to get to him, everybody had said when I was pregnant, they're like, oh, people who have kids already, they're like, those, you love your sleep and those 3 a.m. feedings are brutal. And there's going to be times where you're frustrated. And I honestly, maybe I will feel this at some point, but now he's about 10 weeks old. Even those 3 a.m. feedings, they feel great because it feels like such a gift that I get to have him because, when you're told you have a 5% shot and it hadn't worked for so long, I still have to pinch myself because I never thought I'd be here ever.
Oh my gosh. I have such a grin of smile. I'm just so happy for you. I'm so happy for you. So what would you say to someone that's currently navigating infertility or early pregnancy and they're just struggling. Yeah. They're struggling with the process. They're struggling to trust the process, to trust their body. It's just a challenge because you've been there.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were definitely, points in time where I thought about throwing in the towel, and I don't ever judge people who do, right? Everybody has a different breaking point, right? And that breaking point shifts, I noticed, because at the beginning of my infertility struggles, somebody had said to me, and I got really angry when they said it. They're like, if you really want to be a mom, you'll be a mom. It just might not be the way you saw it being in your mind's eye, right? It might be donor eggs. You might adopt. And I remember at the time being like, that's not what I want. How, I don't want to hear this from you. Like, I want it the way I want it. And so it never occurred to me earlier on in the process that I would ever even consider donor eggs. We didn't end up using them, but we had gone down that road. I bought them. We were going to be using them. And for some people, those chains don't shift, right? I know plenty of people who decided that, they were going to stop after a certain number of fertility treatments, and that's fine too. So I think that the thing that I would say to people, and that I have said to a lot of people who, kind of friends of friends who seek me out if they're going through fertility treatments, because they know I've kind of been through it. Trust yourself. And it's a really difficult process, especially if you don't have any kind of medical or scientific background. It's so hard to trust yourself because you have doctors, many of whom are approaching this as if they have the answers. And they don't, because there is the science, but there's also the art to the science. Because, my big takeaway from this whole process is that the human body generally, but the female body specifically, is this wild, miraculous mystery, right? Everybody's hormones are a little bit different. They're different from month to month. They shift between, it's just, there's so much going on. And your body. You might not be a scientist, but your body. And I wish, if I could do it over again, that I'd listened to myself sooner, because I was talking to doctors early on about wanting to do a mini stim, because I said, I just don't think that this heavy duty cocktail of hormones is good for me. And I don't think it's going to result in a baby because I'm not feeling well. No, you don't know what you're talking about. You need to just get the numbers. So I would say to anybody who's going through this right now, find somebody who is a medical practitioner and has the background and the knowledge that you don't have, but who's willing to work with you really in a partnership and listen to you, because you know your body better than anybody else.
Those are really good words. In fact, I'm going to ask you more words of wisdom, but we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? All right, we'll be right back.
Hey, it's Sterling K. Brown from the Hulu original series Paradise. The next chapter begins as Xavier's search for his wife takes him above ground, and what he finds will change everything. It was never just about the bunker. Tune in and discover the truth lies outside. Paradise, the official podcast, premieres February 16th and stream Paradise on February 23rd on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
Okay, we're back. So you've been through quite the journey. You've also been part of the community starting at 10 weeks. So you saw a lot of folks and you connected with a lot of folks. So what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
I think maintaining a sense of openness when you're going through either a fertility struggle or your pregnancy or certainly early parenthood. Things are on any of those fronts, they're not going to go exactly the way you think they should, exactly the way you plan for them to go. So I found it to be very helpful for me. And I would definitely recommend that other people try to not be so caged in by their expectations, right? Kind of, which is very hard for me. I'm not a go with the flow kind of person typically, but I think it's really important to try to be that way so you can have flexibility, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not always about the minutia of what's taken place. It's really about taking a step back and saying, well, what am I trying to accomplish here, big picture? What do I want my pregnancy to look like? So does this one little detail matter so much if it's going to be stressing me out to such an extent that now I'm having this, agita-riddled pregnancy, right? So I think that flexibility is really important. And then, gleaning information from the people around you, and whether that's a team that you've built of people around you or that community that you kind of find yourself stumbling upon, right? Because everybody has a little bit of a different experience. And if we all share what that experience is, it makes for a more enriched experience for you. I mean, I had a lot of conversations. There were sort of side conversations with people after classes, and I picked up a piece of information that was either something I hadn't thought about or hadn't thought about in that particular way. And those things are really, really helpful because I think we're in the world that we live in now, there's not a lot of community. So when you can find those pockets of community, that really helps in something that's a big process that you go through in that journey.
Well, I don't usually ask this question, but I think I'm going to start asking this at the end of birth stories. How do you think the whole experience has changed you as a person?
Oof, that's a good question. Well, I think because I've always been planning type, very type A, like control, this whole process has made me realize that that's A, not always the way things go, and B, not always the way you would want them to go, right? I mean, if I had gotten pregnant in that first cycle, the baby I have now would not be the baby I have. And I don't think I'd be the mom that I am. I think I'm a better mother for having been through the infertility struggle that I went through. It taught me perseverance. It taught me patience, humility. I mean, a lot of these traits that I thought I had before that I really didn't until you kind of relinquish yourself to, this is what's happening. I can only control so much. It's not like anything else I've done in my life where, well, if I study harder or if I work harder, I'm going to get what I want. Some of it was just, relinquishing control and trusting that you would get there, which was very hard for me. And I think that's going to put me in good stead as a mother and a parent because, as you know, Deb, as a parent of older kids, things don't always go the way exactly you want them to go, right?
No, they do not. I actually learned that. I relate to you, Elizabeth, a lot in the planning, and like what you just said was like, can you study yourself? Like that is me. Can I study hard enough? Can I work hard enough to make X, Y, and Z happen?
Yeah.
And that's always worked for me.
Yeah.
Except as a parent. Right. And I thought, and I think a lot of people out there are like, I'm going to study about being a parent. I'm going to study about my baby. I'm going to make sure we hit the milestones. Like you can do all the studying, but then you have to let it go and see who's actually in front of you and parent that child.
Well,
and so I appreciate you saying
I mean, it's very funny that you say it that way because one of the other kind of not going according to plan, things that happened during my pregnancy. So we didn't want to find out if we were having a boy or a girl because it was the only part of the process that felt like it wasn't controlled. So we really wanted a surprise. And I communicated that with my doctors every time I saw them. And then they had redacted it from everything. And then my amnio came around and it was posted in my my portal. So I was very upset. So I spent the rest of the pregnancy knowing that we were having a boy, and my partner did not know what we were having, and I kept it from him for all those months.
Oh my gosh, that'd be so hard. I never could have done that.
It was impossibly difficult. I was so worried I was going to slip. But it was funny because, I know you've talked to other people before, and it's a big, contentious topic about like gender disappointment. And I realized when I found out we were having a boy, I had spent my entire life convinced that I was having a daughter. Like, it never occurred to me that I could have a boy, which sounds insane, but I just was like, I'm having a daughter. So much so that, that story I told at the beginning where when I was 12 years old and I bought a onesie, it was like very gendered onesie that I had bought. So I was having a daughter, and I realized that the biggest gift was having a son, because I had spent 20 plus years knowing exactly what it was going to be like to be a girl mom and exactly what I was going to do with my daughter. And now being a parent, it's like, you have no idea what your kid is going to be into, who they're going to be, what they're going to like. And so to me, it's such a gift that I have a son, because I've spent literally 6 months thinking about what I wanted to do with a boy. So now this is really just completely virgin territory for me, which is exactly the way it's supposed to be.
Okay, I have one final question. Where is the onesie that you bought when you were 12?
So that is at my parents' house. My parents are...
Oh my God, you still have it.
I totally still have it. Not only do I still have it, but what we ended up naming our son kind of a more obscure Irish name. And I happened to find in a jewelry box the other day a book of Irish baby names that I had also bought right around the same vintage, right? I was like, a late, early teenager when I had bought this. And I looked up his name in this book of Irish baby names, and I had circled that name.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that's now getting framed to put in his nursery, but it's yeah. So I've been planning this for a really long time.
Oh my gosh, Elizabeth, this has been such a joy speaking with you and letting me be on your journey and taking us all as listeners on your journey. So thank you for being open and vulnerable and honest and just sharing your story. As you said, it's important to hear not the challenging stories I think are also important to hear, but also to have joyous stories as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a blast, and thank you for everything you do at the studio. It was definitely a wonderful part of the journey.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of Yoga, Birth, Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.